Welcome to the Real Texas Radio Podcast. I am your host, Bronin. I've got an exciting show planned today. First, I'm going to talk about the District 33 congressional race here in Texas, which is led by Julie Johnson, the incumbent, although her district has been reconfigured, and Colin Allred. Colin Allred is claiming racism from another candidate who is seeking office here in Texas. Then I want to talk about some transportation updates. A new study has been released showing how dangerous it is to drive on Texas roads. And Southwest Airlines, they have retired some of their long-standing, very popular policies that have differentiated them from other airlines. I want to talk about that and some of the reaction to those changes. So let's get into it. But first, if you haven't already, please make sure to like, subscribe, and follow the Real Texas Radio Podcast from wherever you stream. You can also find me on YouTube now. If you had trouble finding the Real Texas Radio Podcast on YouTube, I upload all my episodes there. You can follow the show on X at RTR_Bronin, RTR_Bronin. And make sure, if you haven't already, check out my columns. I am publishing a column. I'm going to aim for a weekly basis. I've already got 6 columns out about all Dallas local issues. The column, it's totally free to read. It's got plenty of photos and video to accompany the text. My articles, I keep them all short, pithy, and witty. In fact, you can sign up on Substack by email, and you can get the column to be sent directly to your inbox, so you don't have to forget about going and looking for it. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. All right, now, you're listening to the Real Texas Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Bronin, just a fed-up taxpayer, bringing you all of your Texas, local, and national news. Okay, let's talk about the District 33 House race here in Dallas. And this is one of the reconstituted districts. The 2 front runners in the race, there are 4 candidates, but the 2 front runners are the lesbian, fabulously wealthy multimillionaire Julie Johnson. She's a freshman Democrat congresswoman, and she is challenging Colin Allred, or they're challenging each other. Colin Allred, you might recall, he was scared away by Jasmine Crockett. Jasmine Crockett, with her totally legitimate real poll with 600 people that shows that she is a dragon force against all Republicans, Ken Paxton, John Cornyn, just anybody that might even think about getting in her way. Well, Jasmine Crockett has a poll with 600 people that she didn't share with the public, showing what a force she is. And she did share it, so she claims, with Colin Allred, and presumably that was part of the reason informing his decision to drop out of the U.S. Senate race, which would have been his second U.S. Senate race, because he ran back in 2024, and Ted Cruz beat him by almost 1 million votes. So Colin Allred, he announces back in December, almost 2 months ago, that he's going to jump back into the congressional race. He was a 2 or 3 term congressman for the area, roughly his area, but except now he wasn't my congressperson. I used to be in Jasmine Crockett's district before the redistricting. Now she's been moved out. So anyway, we didn't really hear much news from Colin Allred. And Julie Johnson, I mentioned before, she's got a pretty heavy presence on Twitter or X. I don't know about the other platforms. But I was just looking around for some polling data, which can be hard to find for these fairly local, regional races. And Colin Allred, back in December, so right after he jumped into this race for District 33, he put out a poll as well. I guess he was inspired by Jasmine Crockett. And GBAO, whatever the hell that is, conducted this poll with 500 likely Democrat primary voters. I don't recall being contacted by these pollsters. I am a likely Democrat primary voter. And according to this poll, again, I'm sure it's completely legit, 58% of respondents said that they would be voting for Colin Allred versus 30% for Julie Johnson. I find that hard to believe that it's that far apart, that the two candidates are that far apart. Now, that said, I'm going to be voting for neither of these candidates, even when I take a Democrat primary ballot. There are two other contestants, we might call them, candidates, losers, also-rans, whatever you want to use, whatever term. And I'm not even going to say their names, because one of them I don't even remember. And I'm going to be voting for one of those two losers, definitely. Whoever I can figure out is going to lose the race, that's the person who I'm going to be supporting for District 33 in the Democrat primary. So Colin Allred, the non-entity loser that he is, who is, as far as I can tell, he was getting no traction. I don't even know what kind of a campaign he's running, if anything. Well, he posted this video yesterday of himself in the gym or in a home gym somewhere. Colin Allred is the victim of a racist insult. And do you know who the culprit is? You're never going to believe this, who the culprit is. We knew this was coming. We knew that James Tallarico, the white male Democrat panderer, the latest after Clay Jenkins and Gavin Newsom and all the rest, that he has been accused by Colin Allred of making a racially insensitive remark. So let's hear Colin Allred, who, by the way, is smiling throughout this video as he reports the racism that he has been insulted by.
Morning, everybody. It's cold out here, and I got some steam coming off my head because I'm, just finished my workout. Got some steam coming on my ears too.
That's funny, apparently.
That James Tallarico had the temerity and the audacity to say to a black woman that he had signed up to run against a mediocre black man, meaning me, not a formidable, intelligent black woman, meaning Jasmine Crockett. Let me just break this down into a few segments here. First of all, let me just give you some free advice, James. If you want to compliment black women, just do it. Just do it. Don't do it while also tearing down a black man. Okay? We've seen that play before. We're sick and tired of it. We're tired of folks using praise for black women to mask criticism for black men. That's not good for our community. It's not good. It doesn't work, and we know what you're doing. Okay, so if next time you want to praise a black woman, just do that. Leave black men out of it. Just leave a lot of things out of it. Second of all, did you ever have a coach or somebody,
Okay, that's enough. You get it. So apparently, well, this is according to Colin Allred, but I can tell you already that the Tallarico campaign, they released a statement, which I'm sure they were sweating over getting the perfect wording. They deny Colin Allred's characterization of the remarks that he called Colin Allred a mediocre black man. This is the official statement from the Tallarico campaign. This is a mischaracterization of a private conversation. In my praise of Congresswoman Crockett, who he's running against, James Tallarico running against, I described Congressman Allred's method of campaigning as mediocre. But his life and service are not. I would never attack him on the basis of race. Okay, and there's more, but you get the idea. So that's interesting, though. He did fess up to calling Colin Allred's campaign mediocre, which in my observation is quite charitable, because I don't even think that the Allred campaign has risen to the level of mediocre. Now, this was really, I think, a gift for Colin Allred, because I don't think he was really getting any attention. I don't think he's running much of a campaign. I think Julie Johnson, she wants the seat more than Colin Allred does, even though I think Julie Johnson has a lot more money than Colin Allred does. But Julie Johnson, she really wants it. She just had her one term in Congress before those evil Republicans in Texas, they pulled the rug out from under her, redistricted. Now she's got to run against this black guy. And you knew that it was coming for James Tallarico. Again, as a pandering Democrat white male, that somebody was going to call him a racist at some point. It happens to all of them, these white guys. They think that they can reach a certain amount of pandering. They can hit a certain threshold and then they're going to be safe. I got bad news for you. This was really good for Colin Allred. He got a write-up in the Dallas Morning News. He's gotten a write-up in a lot of places. He's getting his name into the conversation, whereas previously he was not part of the conversation. And all he had to do was basically nothing. He just had to have his name mentioned in a private conversation that leaked. And now James Tallarico was forced to defend this remark or this non-event. You know what? If James Tallarico himself, if he had taken the bullet for Martin Luther King Jr., he still would not be able to escape somebody calling him a racist at some point. It's how it goes nowadays. So just wanted to weigh in on the congressional race that I will have the opportunity to get to vote in. And I realize I'm very cynical. I realize it's very likely in the general the winner is going to be Julie Johnson or Colin Allred, as bleak as that is. And, I think that Colin Allred is probably the bigger non-entity, so he's probably the one that you'd want to win of the, if the Republican is not going to win, which I don't think that's in the cards. But he's going to have to work for it. And I'm going to be voting, like I said, for one of those two losers. Okay, I want to move into another area, transportation. And the Dallas Morning News, they published an article on a report. And, their article, they title it, Dallas has worst fatal car crash rate among large cities, study finds. And this study, it's characterized as a joint study that was conducted by Droffel Law Firm, a St. Louis-based personal injury firm, and 1.21, a San Diego-based marketing agency, found that the fatal crash rate was the highest among large American cities. And just to give you some numbers on that, 14 or nearly 14 fatal motor vehicle crashes annually per every 100,000 residents between 2014 and 2023. And we know that the stats for pedestrians in Dallas are abysmal as well. And yeah, I live in a one-car household. It's really my husband's car, but he lets me use it sometimes. He commutes to work, and I try to convince him, don't get a car. Let me try something else cheaper first. I'm not going to go into a big rant about how expensive cars are, how 1 in 5 Americans who owns a car is paying over $1,000 a month just on the note. That's not including insurance, maintenance, fuel, and other costs. Just on the note, over $1,000 a month. In other words, a mortgage. I have mortgage payments that are significantly lower than that. But like I said, I'm not going to get into it. If you're a Dallas driver or you're a driver in DFW, I'm sure that comes as no surprise. I know it's like one of those things like the weather. Everybody, no matter where they live in the world, thinks they have the most unusual mercurial weather there is. People in Boston think they have the strangest weather. People in Texas think they have the strangest weather. People in Ireland think they have the strangest weather. And I'm sure many, many, many other places, they all think they have the strangest weather. And I would say the same statement you could apply about driving. People in Boston think that the worst drivers are in Boston. People in New York think that they are the worst drivers there. I'm sure in Atlanta people think they are the worst drivers, or Los Angeles. But well, here we got the data. Apparently, it's pretty bad in Dallas. And with the pedestrian data, we often are at the top of the list in the negative sense, at the top of the list for pedestrian deaths and fatalities, or pedestrian injuries and fatalities, I should say. You know what's something that really drives me crazy? So most of the time I'm a pedestrian. I run a few errands throughout the week. I'm responsible. I wait at the crosswalk. I wait for the walk signal. I am not blaring music and just walking blindly into the street without checking to see if somebody's making a right turn before I cross. I'm not trying to put my life in jeopardy, but the amount of inattentiveness that I observe, that's in cars that don't have tinted windows, so I'm able to see what the driver is looking at, if the driver is paying attention, or if the more likely scenario, they're looking at the cell phone and they're not looking out for pedestrians. They don't expect to see a pedestrian in much of Texas unless it's a homeless, junkie, bum, criminal, vagrant, mental patient, ne'er-do-well, recidivist, reprobate with 9 lives. But something that really drives me nuts is when drivers, they stop on top of the crosswalk. Sometimes they completely cover it, but they don't respect the line that typically precedes the crosswalk. And, you know, it's one thing, it's possibly excusable if you park temporarily on the crosswalk because you're making a right turn where you can make a right turn. And, you know, it possibly excusable, but people do it often when they're in the left lane. And then not only do they block the crosswalk if there's a pedestrian, but then if your fellow motorist who is in the right lane and can make a right turn, now you've obstructed the view for the person trying to make the right turn. You know what I would do with that? I know speed cameras have been banned in Texas, and you know what? I supported that. I support that. My problem with the tickets is that they end up on your insurance, and then you get punished for 6 years for something you did that's a relatively minor offense. So that I don't really like, especially when we know how many people are driving around without insurance and without a license that are creating a much greater public safety threat. So I really don't like just dumping more insurance premiums on drivers. But something I would do, I think you should get a fine if you park on the crosswalk. Can start out being a modest fine. I don't think that it should be linked to your insurance. I'm not saying that you need to be punished for 6 years because you parked on the crosswalk. Start out $25. Next time you do it, $50. Then it goes up to $100. Those are behaviors, or not letting a pedestrian cross the street when the pedestrian has the right of way. I wouldn't mind a speed camera hitting, or let's not call it a speed camera, traffic camera. I wouldn't mind that, to be quite honest. Again, I'm not saying that we link it to insurance. That I would oppose. But I think that there are, and you know what? I know police, they'll make a big social media campaign about, we had 100 officers out doing speed traps this weekend, and we issued X amount of tickets and all. Is that the best use of time? I mean, you can argue that having a police presence somewhere in a busy area, that there can be other peripheral benefits to that, rippling effect benefits, but it's not a good use of time of a human when a camera and AI can do this. But again, I know that's another politically dead issue that comes to vehicles. I understand that cars are more important than pedestrians, at least in Texas. I get it, but I just wanted to share my views on that before we get into talking about another transportation matter that has come up of late here in Texas. Okay, I'm actually going to spend a few minutes. I want to talk about Southwest Airlines, which, as you probably know, it's the largest private sector Dallas-based employer. I believe it's the largest private sector employer. And they just recently changed some of their long-standing policies, including open seating, including 2 bags checked, quote unquote, free. Okay, there's no such thing as free. And there are very mixed opinions about this, particularly the open seating, meaning you get to choose your seat based upon how quickly you check in, whether you're in the A, B, or C group. And I fly Southwest occasionally, but I don't fly with very much. Even if I'm going on vacation for a couple of weeks, I'm a one bag kind of a guy. I might buy a pack of fresh white t-shirts that I can interchange with the same pair of shorts and jeans, one pair of shoes. I say that not to brag. I'm just telling you that's how I roll. I don't like having a whole lot of crap with me. I'm not a shopper. And you know what I noticed whenever I would fly Southwest, which again, not very often because I do go home to Boston once a year, sometimes twice. And I think they cut their direct route some time ago. It looks like it's back. Maybe they have it seasonally. But Delta's got a direct route from DFW. JetBlue's got a direct flight. Spirit Airlines. American would be more expensive. But I got 3 options right there between or among Spirit, Delta, JetBlue. So typically I can get a direct and I'm flying from DFW and usually I can get it affordably. But something that would really drive me crazy, you'd think, right, how important this 2-bag free policy is, that everybody would just check their bag, right? And 50 pounds per bag, so you can check 100 pounds of luggage, right? But you get onto the flight and people are still stuffing the overhead bins. And again, not with a small purse or a backpack or something sensible. They've got the maximum size, maximum weight rolly bag that you can put on. And that's what really jams traffic getting on and off of the plane and drives me nuts. And then usually I don't choose a seat. It depends. If it's a short flight, I might chance a middle seat and, getting squished in between a couple of whales or mountain walruses. Anything over the 3-hour range, I might spring to get an aisle or a window if the upgrade on the price is reasonable. And so that's another piece. So if you were able to get checked in the B group anyway, right, I know you could pay an extra fee. You get in the A group, get to board quicker. But so long as you got in the B group or even in the first half of the C group, then chances are you'd be able to get a window or an aisle without having to pay extra on Southwest. But here's the thing. Southwest, if you recall, up until fairly recently, they didn't show up in Google searches. And the reason for that is because they were much more expensive than the other airlines, particularly Spirit, particularly Frontier, or some of the other budget carriers. So you didn't have that side-by-side comparison. You had to go to the Southwest website, and it was almost always cheaper, significantly, even if you had to buy the bag to get onto Spirit, for example. And so, like I said, getting back to the overhead bins, you know what's something that really drives me crazy? So then I have a backpack, and even though included in the fare, because again, there's nothing free, even if you were flying Southwest, even though you get the 2 free check bags, you still get to put a bag overhead. But if it was full, which it normally is, then the flight attendant would say, hey, you can't put your backpack. We have to let some bleep hole who's got 3 bags, including a backpack, including a rolly bag, including a purse, and including other things that they've snuck on the plane. They get the priority. You have to put yours under the seat and get to sit between the 2 mountain walruses. So thanks. So that drives me nuts. And if you know where I really notice where there's not a whole lot of overhead bags, or certainly fewer than on Southwest, for example, or American or Delta, which let you bring on the overhead bag? Spirit and Frontier, because guess what? The agent when you're boarding at the counter is getting a commission to catch everybody who's trying to bring on a bag that's too big, and then they charge you, I don't know what it is, maybe $50 for an overhead bag. It's cheaper to check. You still have to pay, but you get a really cheap fare. And so people, they don't try it. They don't try it on Spirit. So there's far fewer bags going into the overhead bin. So that usually can make the boarding process and the disembarkation process faster. Of course, you got to deal with all the families and the don't even get me started. I'll get in trouble. But it just, I don't really like to fly. I have no fear of flying. It's not that. It's the worst part, I think, is the before process and the after process, all the work and the nonsense that you have to go through. I'm good at flying and I'm good at traveling. For example, one of my skills is removing any metal from my person before going through the metal detector, especially when I've had 10 or 15 minutes to wait in line to prepare. That's something I'm really good at that. You know what? Even better, I don't wear any metal if I know I'm going through a metal detector, just to move the process along. And you know what else? This is a pro tip. When I do put my bag up in the overhead bin, which I try to do, even my backpack, just to get a little bit more leg room, don't put the bag above your head. That's stupid. Put it across and put it a few bins forward. So that way you can get out of your seat and you don't have to worry about turning around. Nobody knows that. I wish that Southwest, with all their jingles, I wish that they encourage that kind of behavior. But people, they probably wouldn't listen anyway. People are just so stupid on airplanes. You know, of course, the most important thing that I'm worried about, aside from not getting stuck in the middle seat, God forbid, between some terror, is making sure that you got a qualified couple of pilots up in the cockpit.
Their pilot might be a transgendered witch.
Let's hope not. Let's hope not. And you know what? Something I've been reading about recently, there have been a number of articles I've seen in the Wall Street Journal, are the toxic fumes that have been flowing into the aircraft and that have been harming passengers, brain injuries, head injuries. I know that a pilot or his family, I think they tried to sue the airline, whichever it was, after he passed. The problem is with those kind of things, it's very hard to isolate that event from other health issues that could be going on in a person's life. But a lot of people have been injured by these fumes flowing into the plane. And I believe that the Congress and the U.S. Senate, they have been alerted to this issue. I don't know how seriously they're taking it, but, you know, I really rather not spend a whole lot of time up in the sky. Even first or business class, you still got to go through all of the rigmarole and the nonsense in order to get into the seat, but I suppose that's better. And I brought up the whole Southwest for a reason. You know, people are up in arms. It's going to kill the culture, and people aren't going to fly Southwest anymore. You know what? I have some visitors coming. My parents are coming later in the year, and we were planning their trip and looking at flights. And guess what? I put in their dates, and Southwest, for the two of them to fly, came up as the cheapest option. Now, that has never happened, ever. That has never happened. I know Southwest, obviously, they preference certain routes. I think they're the biggest domestic carrier, so they obviously have a lot of direct flights. I live basically on the runway of Love Field, as I joke. And you can probably hear the planes flying by me here in my real high-end professional studio. So, you know, it should be easy for me to get around on Southwest because it's right up the street, but it's not the case. In many cases, it isn't. It's cheaper to go. I run all the numbers, and I end up going to DFW, and I fly on Spirit. But I ended up buying my parents, I showed them the flight, sent it to them. They bought Southwest seats, and that's never happened. And guess what? They're not going to check bags beneath. They'll probably bring one suitcase between them, maybe a backpack. And, you know, we're going to figure out the seating. I assume they're going to be seated together if they purchase the reservation together. I think the airline does try to do that for as bad as they can be. But I'm not too upset about it. And, I don't find that the open seating policy really move things along faster. By the time you have all of the fake wheelchairs, oh, excuse me, sorry, that wasn't very sensitive. But you have all the phony baloney pre-boarders and the pre-pre-boarders and the pre-pre-pre-pre-pre-boarders. But by the time all that happens, which you have to do anyway with the open seating policy, then it still takes forever. And you know what? I try to be the last person on. I don't want to spend any extra time on the plane at all, particularly getting off. And usually I'm in the back because I don't pay for the seat. So they stick us all in the back, the hobos. Well, I didn't see if they have changed the drink and snack policy, if you're still going to get a complimentary cup of coffee or a Diet Coke if you want, and a couple of cookies. I don't know if they're still going to have that. I'm not going to pay for it. I don't pay for it on Spirit. I don't think I've ever paid for the food or anything like that. Bring your bottle of water. You can go without the snacks. You look around who's in the cabin with you. I don't think anybody needs a snack in the 3-hour window. Everybody could do with a little break from stuffing their mouths. In any case, let me get off of the subject, but that's kind of my thinking on Southwest. And you know what else I think they got rid of too? That customer of size policy, where if you're obese and you need 2 seats, you could buy the 2 seats and then you send them an email, let them know, and they send you back a credit or they refund you for one of the seats. I haven't had to encounter that myself personally, but I think that's out the window. I don't know if they're still going to force you to buy the 2 seats or how that's going to work. But that's my take on Southwest Airlines. Okay, I think this is a good place to wrap up. Thank you for tuning in once again to the Real Texas Radio Podcast. Keep tuning in. Keep listening. I will catch you on the next episode. In the meantime, follow me on X, RTR_Bronin, RTR_Bronin.